So relocating to a brand new city is a huge life change, and if you're planning on a move to Portland, Oregon, it's probably exciting and overwhelming all at once. Now, I see relocation buyers make the same expensive, stressful, and totally avoidable mistakes over and over again, and some of them can cost thousands of dollars, and others end up turning into being what should be your dream move turn into a daily frustration. So today we're going to talk about the top mistakes relocation buyers make when they move to Portland, and more importantly, what you can do to avoid them to make this transition as smoothly and confidently as possible without regrets. So hello, I'm David Backholer. I'm a real estate broker based here in the Portland metro area, and I help buyers and sellers all over Portland and the surrounding cities. Now, a big part of my job is helping people relocate here from out of state. So if you're moving for a new job, moving here to be closer to family, or simply to start the next chapter in your life, this video is going to walk you through the biggest pitfalls to watch out for and the smart strategies that will make your move as stress-free as possible. Okay, so the first mistake I see is underestimating just how many moving parts there are in relocating. And people underestimate the complexity of a relocation. Buying a home when you already live in the area is one thing, but what if you're relocating from out of state? That's a whole different ballgame. You're not just choosing a house, you're choosing an entirely different lifestyle, new routines, new climate, and probably a new pace of life. Now, one of the most common issues that people run into is timing. Buyers often assume that they can sell their current home, move here, and buy a new home all in one seamless timeline. But in reality, those things rarely line up. Now, maybe your home sells faster than expected. Maybe the house that you want here has a delayed closing, or maybe you're dealing with a job transition, or it simply could take a while for the right home to be on the market. Now, there's a good solution, and the solution that many of my clients do work through is to build flexibility into your plan. That might mean arranging short-term or mid-term housing like a furnished rental, extended stay, Airbnb, those types of things. That way you have a bit of breathing room to house hunt without the pressure. It's also important to remain incredibly flexible throughout the process and keep your fingers crossed. Okay, so let's move on to the second big mistake I see, and that's failing to account for the true cost of relocating. People often budget for the down payment, closing costs, and moving costs, and that's about it. But there are so many more expensive that can catch you off guard. For example, if you're moving from California, Arizona, or the East Coast, shipping your furniture, your vehicles, and your personal belongings across the country can cost significantly more than you might expect. If you're selling a home elsewhere, you might have to cover temporary housing here and a mortgage there for a short time. There's also the settling in costs. People don't think about, new furniture, new landscaping, maybe upgrades to your appliances when you buy your house here, replacing the furnace. In Oregon, there's a lot of different costs that you might not be used to. Utility bills might be a little bit higher here if you're coming from a warmer climate. And then things that we have in Oregon is the removal of moss, gutter cleaning, basement waterproofing, all the things that are specific to the Oregon climate. Okay, so mistake number 3 is where people choose their home before they choose the area. This is probably the single biggest mistake relocation buyers make. They might fall in love with a home before they really understand the different neighborhoods and what neighborhood might be the best fit for them. Now, Portland is incredibly diverse in terms of neighborhoods. It's a city of neighborhoods. Every neighborhood has different character, lifestyle. You might even find some different microclimates. Living in Lake Oswego, for example, is a very different experience to living in Northeast Portland. Beaverton and Hillsborough have easy access to tech jobs, and if you're looking for a newer housing, Sherwood is definitely an option for you. And Sherwood and Canby offer a quieter, small town feel. East Portland has a lot of older homes and more urban energy, but also has some heavier traffic, and sometimes longer commutes here too. Now the solution here is to flip the process. Choose the area before you choose the house. Spend time exploring the neighborhoods. Think about your lifestyle. Do you want walkable streets with coffee shops and restaurants? Do you need a quiet cul-de-sac and a big yard? Do you want proximity to hiking trails and nature? These are all the decisions that you should start with and should drive your home search, and not the other way around. Now the good news is that doesn't have to delay your search. Portland is not a big city. It's likely you'll decide fairly quickly if the east side or west side of the city is right for you. The two different sides of the city are going to have a completely different feel, and you may even want to consider living outside of Portland. But I do recommend you come out here for a long weekend or a week to take a look around first and make that decision on what part of in what area is right for you. Okay, so on to mistake number 4, and that's not planning ahead for where you're going to live while you're house hunting. Now, if you're lucky, the timing of selling your old home and closing on a new one here lines up perfectly. But unfortunately, for most relocation buyers, it doesn't quite line up that way. And that's where people can get into trouble. Now, if you are relocating from another state, I definitely recommend you think about your short-term plans here before you start shopping. Options like short-term furnished rentals are probably a good option. You may be lucky to have some corporate housing as well. That can give you a little bit of breathing room and allow you the time to make that smart decision. This is especially important if you're downsizing, retiring, or moving for lifestyle reasons. Your needs might evolve once you spend a little bit of time here. You might realize you want to be closer to certain medical centers, or you may just fall in love with a different part of town than what you'd expect. Okay, so mistake number 5 is when buyers choose a home that looks great on paper, but forget to think about the actual day-to-day life. Now, when you relocate, it's not just about the house, it's about your entire lifestyle shifting. Things that might seem like minor details can become major frustrations later. For example, maybe you move into a beautiful home in the beautiful town of West Lynn, but that could be 30 minutes away from the social club that you might want to join. Maybe you buy in Hillsborough because you love the new homes and the price points, but then you realize you're constantly stuck in traffic if you're trying to drive into downtown for concerts, work, events, or dinners. Now, if you're approaching retirement, that becomes even more important. Think about what your life will look like in 5 or 10 years time from now. Do you want single level living so you're not climbing stairs every day? Are you going to want to walk? Do you need to be near a coffee shop, a pharmacy, near a park? Or do you want to be near a hospital or healthcare facilities? Okay, so we're about halfway through our list, but before I continue, I did want to remind you that every week I release new videos on what it's like to live in the Portland metro area, so be sure to subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all of that latest content. Also, if you are considering making the move or want to get in touch, feel free to text, call, send me an email. Please do get in touch though. All my contact information can be seen down below. Okay, so now let's move on and talk about the next mistake, and that's overlooking Oregon's true cost of living. Don't assume that the cost of living here will match what you're used to elsewhere. For example, property taxes in Oregon, they do work differently than many other states. We don't have a state sales tax here, but property taxes often fund more of the local budget, so they might be a little bit higher than what you expect. And they do vary significantly by county and even by some neighborhoods. Now, a home in Washington County would typically have a different, maybe a lower tax amount for property taxes than Multnomah County. We've also got Clackamas County as well. That also is a little bit lower than Multnomah County. Now, homeowner association fees are another one people tend to overlook. Many newer neighborhoods in places like Happy Valley, Wilsonville, even parts of Bethany have HOAs with monthly fees, and that can cost hundreds of dollars to add to your housing costs. Now, they will often cover amenities, sometimes pools or shared spaces, but that maintenance costs do need to be in your budget. And then there's the maintenance. Portland's climate is pretty mild. We get some snow, we definitely get some rain, and that means moss grows quickly, gutters fill up. We also have a lot of older homes here, and they need a little bit more upkeep to stay in good condition. Landscaping, things grow so quickly here. Landscaping is definitely a bit more expensive than perhaps what you're used to because of how frequently you need to do it, especially if you're coming from a drier climate. And if you are buying an older home, then there's potential upgrades to insulation ventilation, windows, heating might not be so efficient. So there are going to be some bills you need to consider. And that leads us nicely actually on to mistake number 7. And I've labeled this, when people ignore Portland specific home issues. Basically, this would be where a lot of out-of-state buyers get caught off guard, not really understanding the unique challenges that do come with Portland homes. Now, our region does have a ton of older homes. A large proportion of homes on the east side, they're over 100 years old, and that's part of the charm, that's part of the reason I love the east side. But it does mean you'll encounter things that you may not have dealt with elsewhere. Knob and tube wiring is quite common, cast iron sewer lines that could be replaced, maybe some oil heating, or just slightly less functional floor plans. Now, these aren't necessarily deal breakers, but they can add up, and some of those costs can factor in, something to consider when you're going through the negotiations. Now, our rain does mean that we get some water intrusion. We got a lot of basements here and crawl spaces, and it's not uncommon to find that there is some water in those areas. So I always highly recommend a really good inspection when you buy a house, but also consider things like a sewer scope to make sure the sewer lines are well treated. We have a lot of trees, so sometimes you'll see root intrusion into those sewer lines. And then radon is a big issue here as well, so those radon inspections are also highly recommended. Okay, so moving on for mistake number 8 that I commonly see, that's where people don't look far enough ahead. So if you're relocating, it's easy to get that tunnel vision on this step, this particular chapter of your life. But you do need to think, 5 or 10 years ahead from now, because where you'll be then might be very different. It's important to consider that future resale. Will the house sell easily? If it's been on the market for a long time now, will it also be on the market for a long time when you try to sell it? If you're downsizing now, will you still want that smaller home if the grandchildren start to visit every summer? If you're buying a property with lots of land, you want to upkeep that when you're in your 70s. And if you're thinking about this as your forever home, have you considered accessibility and aging in place features? And even if you do plan to stay forever, life happens. If you or your family ever need to sell your property, will that appeal to future buyers? Now, homes near strong schools, walkable neighborhoods, access to public transport, desirable amenities, they tend to hold their value best in Portland, but there are certainly some areas or some types of homes that I might advise you to reconsider. Okay, so moving on to mistake number 9, and that's one that surprises some relocation buyers, and that's real estate. It doesn't operate the same way across the US. Portland's market definitely has its own rhythm, its own competition levels, and its own quirks. For example, some parts of the metro like Lake Oswego, Bethany, or close in northeast Portland, homes can go pending in a few days. They can attract multiple offers in that time as well. However, other areas, homes might sit longer. It could be 30 to 60 days, for example. And that way you might have a little bit more room to negotiate, a little bit more power. Sellers here often price strategically, sometimes slightly under market value to try to get that bidding war. And that can feel unfamiliar if you're coming from a market that's a little bit slower or a little bit more balanced. And I've seen relocation buyers miss out on really good homes because they want to wait, because they don't realize how quickly they need to make that decision. So generally, if you see the right home soon, that house is probably right for somebody else as well. So don't wait too long before writing that offer. Okay, and finally, the biggest mistake I tend to see is when people try to do this on their own. Relocating is a complicated issue, and Portland's market has enough nuances that you don't want to be figuring this out as you go along. And of course, that is where I come in. I specialize in helping out-of-state buyers relocate to the Portland metro area. So feel free to pick up the phone. We can talk through your specific needs and come up with a plan on how you can relocate to the Portland metro area. Okay, so to wrap things up, relocating to Portland, it is an exciting step, but it's also a big one. And the difference between a smooth, successful move and a stressful one often comes down to avoiding these common mistakes. Take the time to plan ahead, budget realistically, and explore the area. And also think about your lifestyle. Don't rush into goals. Think about where you're going to be not just today, but also the long-term future. Now, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.